Today, we're jumping into one of the biggest, most high-stakes arguments happening in the global economy. It's a fight over a single, invisible number, a number that could completely change how we think about everything from interest rates and government debt to the value of our own investments. This is the great R-star debate.
So let's start with a really big question. What if the very compass that central banks are using to steer the entire global economy is, well, broken? That single question is what the R-star debate is all about. It seems like just a measurement problem, but believe me, the consequences could be absolutely massive for all of us.
So what in the world is R-star? The easiest way to think about it is like the economy's neutral gear. It's this theoretical perfect interest rate, that's the rate after you subtract inflation, where the economy is just balanced. It's not overheating and causing crazy inflation, but it's not slowing down and heading for a recession either. It's that just right, Goldilocks rate that policymakers are always trying to find.
And look, this is not some new problem. Almost 100 years ago, an economist named John H. Williams, no relation to the current guy at the New York Fed, by the way, he called the natural rate an abstraction. You can't actually see it or touch it. You can only guess where it is by its effects. Kind of like seeing if the economy is running smoothly or not.
And that's been the challenge for decades. Later on, the famous Milton Friedman pretty much said the same thing. Policymakers are basically flying blind. They know this super important rate exists, but they just don't have a good way to measure it. And that long history of uncertainty, it sets the stage perfectly for the huge debate that's going on right now.
Okay, so first, let's talk about the official story. For years and years, the consensus view, the one you'll hear from top policymakers like New York Fed President John C. Williams, is that R-star is low, and it's been falling for a long time. And the main piece of evidence for this is a model called the Holsten LaBach Williams model, or HLW for short. It's basically the gold standard for policymakers. This chart right here shows you what that model has been saying. You can see a clear, steady drop in the natural rate for both the US and Europe for 30 years leading up to the pandemic. According to this view, the era of low R-star is here to stay.
So you might be asking, why would R-star be falling? Well, the people who believe its low point, these huge, slow-moving global forces. Think about it. Populations are growing slower, and we're not seeing huge productivity breakthroughs. That means there's less demand for big investments. At the same time, because people are living longer and wealth is more concentrated, there's a huge pile of savings building up. So you've got more savings chasing fewer investments, and that naturally pushes down the price of money, which is, you guessed it, the natural interest rate.
But what if that benchmark model, the one everyone uses, is just flat out wrong? Well, that brings us to the other side of this fight, a huge challenge that comes from a bombshell academic paper that questions that whole story.
Right. So in 2022, an economist named Daniel Buntsick drops this paper that really shakes things up. He wasn't arguing about demographics or any of that stuff. No, his claim was much more direct. He basically said that the computer code and the statistics behind the famous HLW model had a critical misspecification, a fundamental error.
Okay, so let's put this side by side, because this is the core of the whole debate. On one hand, you have the HLW model, the go-to for central banks everywhere, which shows that strong downward trend. But on the other hand, you have Buntsick's paper, which says that trend isn't even real. He calls it spurious, basically a statistical ghost that was created by a mistake in the model.
And the difference this correction makes is staggering. According to Buntsick's revised model, once you fix that error, the estimate for the US R-star jumps by over 100 basis points. That's 1 full percentage point higher. So instead of being down near zero like the old model said, his corrected version suggests R-star was actually closer to 1.5%. That is a world of difference.
Now, I know this might sound like some nerdy academic spat, but the real-world consequences of who's right here are enormous. For government policy, for the economy, and for markets. Let's break down exactly why this matters so much.
This table really lays it all out. See, if we live in a low R-star world, then the super low interest rates we saw for a decade were totally normal. It means governments can run big deficits without a problem, and it helps justify high prices for things like stocks and bonds. But if R-star is actually higher, the whole story flips. Interest rates might not fall back to where they were, government debt suddenly becomes way more expensive, and those high asset prices could be in for a rough ride.
And just to make things even more complicated, there's a whole new bunch of things pushing on R-star since the pandemic. We're talking about massive investments needed for AI and the green energy transition, huge government deficits, and countries trying to bring their supply chains back home. All of these things could be pushing R-star up, no matter which model you believe is right.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, the honest answer is in a state of deep, deep uncertainty. We have a debate raging about the past and a whole new set of questions about the future. R-star is more of a mystery now than ever before.
This chart just says it all. The blue line is that official HLW model, chugging along at a very low level. But that yellow line, that's what financial markets are betting on for long-term rates. And you can see they've shot way up. There's this huge gap now. It's like the markets are betting on a higher R-star world while the official model is telling a completely different story.
Which brings us to the million-dollar or maybe trillion-dollar question. Who is right? Is the official model correct, and the markets are just being a little jittery? Or have the markets figured something out? Maybe sniffed out that flaw in the old model that the economists haven't caught up to yet?
So here's the bottom line. The people in charge of the economy are making huge decisions based on a number that is wrapped in this incredible uncertainty. They're steering the ship with a compass that might be pointing true north, or it might be completely broken. And the truth is, right now, nobody knows for sure which it is.
And while the answer to that question will have massive implications for your money, remember, this is not financial advice.